How are we all doing? Today we're gonna be talking about overcoming technophobia is what it's called, especially the fear of AI. And it's basically a teaser for next week. I'm doing a class on it that's for the excuse me, the active NFNLP members. And then once a month from then on, we're going to start doing something just for the active members of NFNLP. But here we go. Okay, so understanding AI phobia, what's the fear and how to reframe it, how to make a better option of it, right? Excuse me. So what is AI phobia? Excuse me. It's the manifestation of technophobia, fear of AI, of robots, advanced technology, but especially the AI, right? Symptoms, of course, are anxiety, elevated heart rate, sweating, nausea. And I think some of the causes, media portrayals of a dystopian AI future. All you have to do is think of Terminator, right? Eventually they'll realize we're redundant systems in a system that we can be eliminated. So that kind of thing. And a lot of people, even if it's not yours, the negative experiences of AI generated information, deep fake videos, revenge porn, some of this stuff, that is a reason why this is going on. But the power of AI, to use a line from a couple of my favorite, two lines from my favorite things, is AI is inevitable. It's inevitable and it's unstoppable. And to use Star Trek analogy, resistance is futile. It's going to go on with you or without you. I was just talking to Christina, who has some of this, by the way. I hope she doesn't mind me sharing it. Uh-oh, she's loading the gun. But there's a story of that when Henry Ford came up with the, not the automobile, but the assembly line, where the car would go down the assembly line, which made it much faster, right? Because before that, the car would be in one place and they'd bring the parts and all the workers would come there. It streamlined everything, which of course the end result of that is they needed a lot less employees. So some of the current people did not like that. They were ready to burn down the new, factories with the assembly line. But once it started, it took off. And of course, the side effect of that technological advance, was prior to the Model T. I forget what percentage, 70% of the people in this country, other than the big cities, New York, Philadelphia, and that, but even in there, a great majority of the people had horses, right? And then once cars came out, horses became, the thing most people didn't need, In fact, they used to say back, 1800, early 1900s, poor people, had horses. Rich people were getting the new cars, the steam-powered cars, things like that. And then by the 1930s, rich people had horses because it became a, luxury. So anyway, it's just the changes that happen. And, we've had several of them after which we'll have a discussion. It's like, when cell phones first came out, depending on your age, you can remember there was some pushback to cell phones. I remember I had a sales job and in the 80s, and the last job outside of this world I had, and we had little beepers, right? And they'd beep you and you'd have to go find a payphone. Remember that? The payphones? Yay! In fact, I worked for Bell, it was a subsidiary of Bell Atlantic, right? So, you'd have to go find a phone. Then they gave us cell phones. They were bag phones then, and they were huge, right? But the company paid for it. And I was kind of excited because it'd be kind of cool. But some of the more mature salespeople go, that's it. It's over. It's going to be horrible. And we're talking, and I go to this one guy, I go, why? And he happened to be my boss. He goes, why? He goes, you can't hide now. You can't say, you get the page, you could take 2 hours to call. I was stuck in traffic. I was in a sales meeting, I was in a sales pitch, something like that, right? Because now we'd expect you at least to check in and say, okay, I'm meeting with my last big sale for that company was Purdue University, right? Purdue University. So he goes, you can't hide, right? So it gave a technological advance, but it did take away I hate to say it that way, some personal freedoms, And that old boss also said, well, there goes my Thursday afternoon golf game, And so anyway, it's just what happens, right? And it's really all about overcoming nervousness, right? But let's look at the neuroscience, one of my favorite things of it. And what's the neuroscience behind, well, basically all fears and phobias, but in this case, AI. It's rooted in your amygdala, and it's the response to uncertainty and threat. We're all here because our ancestors could perceive a threat, always look for existential threats, as my friend Billy would call them, right? That what's going to kill me, and we wanted things not to change because it's about loss of control, right? So it's rooted in there, and it fires up the fight or flight response. It becomes a threat to your existence. So that's a big one that's going on. And what's kind of cool with it, there's also the idea of loss of control, right? Even though intellectually most of us know 90-something% of your life is really outside of your control, for those of us I get people from all over the world, but those of us here in the States, government's going to do what the government's going to do, whether I like it or not, right? So there's now I can control my response to it. That's what we'll be talking about, right? So it's the idea of loss of control. And a rather new one it's the invasion of privacy, right? For most of our history, we didn't have much privacy. When you grew up in a village or a group or whatever it happened to be, right? You didn't have a lot of privacy, right? In fact, if you demanded too much privacy, you probably got thrown out of the group, the tribe, the whatever it happened to be. It's that where you lose that. Some of us experience it when you go away to college and you get in a dorm and you at least have one roommate. Some of us experience it when we go in the military, where for however long your training cycles are, 6 months to a year, you have no privacy, right? And but our culture now is very private. In fact, there's a thing, our nervousness, our responses, a lot of this has gone up exponentially as the square footage of our houses has gone up, right? You go back not that long ago, and in parts, you still have it, like as Bruce would know, in beautiful New York City. You go to the Bronx, you go to the Queens, you go to a place like that, or as my friend who's on the call, Albert would say in New York, there's less privacy there than here, right? But it's the idea of the invasion of privacy, right? But that's a relatively new thing, right? And we've lost our connection to people, which kind of ties into the AI thing. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then I think the big fear behind it is the diminishment of human value. If AI can write a better article than I can, what's that say about me, right? Right. Albert, as soon as AI, I'm waiting for an AI talent agency to kick in, right?
That's coming. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised in about a year from now that we'll start repping AI artists.
Oh yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, in that world, I still wouldn't get cast because they don't look like Brad Pitt. But that's another story. So anyway, so it's that diminishment of who we are. We think we're losing something, if we do that, right? And again, it's the amygdala's response, right? Let's talk about some of the physical symptoms if you have it. But think about other technologies, right? Rapid heartbeat, you get the shortness of breath, breathlessness. If it gets more extreme, you get sweating, chills, dizziness. You know, it's a true phobic response, muscle tension, chest pain, right? And when I work with people with phobias, it's always good to explain to people that unless you have the phobia, you really don't understand it, right? You know, if you don't have a phobia of spiders, you don't understand somebody freaks out when they see a spider, right? And it's not just a light fear. When these things kick in, shortness of breath, all of this is your body telling you there's a major existential threat that's going to kill you, right? And then you have, you know, you get preoccupation with the new technology, you know, maybe not using it, but you become if you have the fear, the phobia, you become excessively preoccupied with the negative aspects of it. You know, Bruce and I were talking about, you know, it's already impacted a lot of the freelancers that used to do things like write your articles or create your PowerPoint, whatever it is, you know, that especially in, you know, other parts of the world that they would do it by our standards, American or the Western world, at a really cheap rate. Well, now you know, you can do it yourself. So it's really doing that. And then what happens, the other cognitive system is you feel detached from reality and basically helpless when you even think about that, right? And then you get that cognitive dissonance, one of my favorite things, where you feel behind in the new technology. And then, of course, we have the behavioral symptoms. If you have a phobia, not just to step out of AI for a moment, of like spiders, you'll avoid anything where you might find a spider, right? And in this case, it'll be refusing to use AI, excuse me, on any platform, right? And then you'll really step into criticizing the technological changes and advancements, right? Moving to areas with limited access to technology, right? Because you feel socially withdrawn and awkward, right? And these kind of things impact your mental health and your physical health, right? So what's the impact of it? Well, it blocks learning and the adaptation to new technologies, right? Leads to avoidance, fight, flight, or freeze. You start to look at it and you freak out and you can't do it. You know, and then of course we read about the job displacements and what's going on, right? Like, you know, as AI improves, you may need less humans to do certain things, right? And of course, there's going to, just like, you know, when we went from the farming agricultural economy to the industrial economy, there was a period of people, you know, that people get left behind, basically. And that's one of the things with the ethical dilemmas. And we get that fear of being left behind, because if you don't jump on it, you might get left behind it. You know, we could, again, as I said earlier, you can think about your cell phones. When they first came out, there were people, I'm never getting a cell phone. You know, even email when it first came out. One of my best experiences of that, I was at a rather conservative organization, the National Guild of Hypnotists. And it was probably 20 something years ago, but we were having a meeting for the instructors, you know, and I'm a whatever I am there, I'm an instructor of instructors, or was. I'm still big with the guild. I love the guild. But we were at the meeting about, you know, the trainers and the instructors and, you know, things like this. And the guy running the meeting, who always embraced every new technology he could get, maybe not to the extent that my buddy Bruce does, but he was into new technology. His name was Elsa Eldridge. And he's up there and he's talking about how we're going to send this stuff out and how we're going to send this stuff out. So by the end of the day, it's probably in the late 90s, early 2000, I need your email, because everything's going to be done via email. And one lady raised her hand. I don't have email. I'm not getting email. And you could tell it caught him off guard. He goes, well, then we don't want to do business with you. And she'd been around for a long time, and it was rather like bam, 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 right? And but he's like, and then he did get polite, but he goes, we can't print all this stuff and ship it to one or two people. This is just how we're going to distribute information, right? And that leads into all the, the internet marketing things. I and certain changes are going to happen. One of my stories, there was a guy I knew at the theater I used to work at in little town in Florida here, and I don't know, we were talking about changes going on. This is probably 5 or 6 years ago. He goes, well, he worked 30 years for, I think it was called the Yellow Pages. And he worked up to like senior executive vice president of sales for the Yellow Page, whatever, Donnelly Corp, whatever it was. Where everybody, those of us here are old enough, remember you had to have a Yellow Page ad. At one point, I was paying $1,000 a month for Yellow Page ads when I lived in the Chicago land area. And he goes, it made me a millionaire. And he goes, I could see it coming, so I retired. And within 4 years, that company was gone. Right? Nobody has Yellow Pages anymore, right? Maybe some, but again, this is just what's happening. Yeah, because he goes, it was going to the, internet marketing. People don't do that. So that's the AI fear. So the benefits of overcoming it, if you have it a little bit, is the ability to engage with the technology. Reduced, I never say get rid of, reduced anxiety when you're looking at AI. Kind of like when you work with people with a phobia of spiders, you reduce it. I mean, especially here where I live, there's several spiders that can kill you, right? I lived in Chicago, there wasn't any, but here it's like, so it's reduced anxiety. When I see a big spider, especially when I'm out at the barn and I see like a wolf spider, which is huge, right? It's like I still have a little anxiety, but not like a complete shutdown. At one point, I had a pretty good phobia of spiders, right? And again, it doesn't have to make sense. I've never been bitten by a brown recluse or, so I had the big negative response, So, and again, it's just how your brain works. For some reason, I was afraid of it. And this reduced the anxiety. So I'm careful around it because also at the barn, they have black widows, and sometimes you'll see brown widows, I think they're called, but they're both very poisonous spiders, and a couple of others that are common around here. So then you get the opportunity to harness AI's magic. We'll call them benefits. I say magic, but you can look at the risks and do it responsibly, right? And so what we do is we use NLP-based methods to reprogram responses, and there's like 24 things you could do. But to make it simple, it's based in phobia, but you have to throw in the trauma work. A lot of times people have a phobia response. It's based in trauma. When I do stuff with guys with severe PTSD from the military, it's not just removing the phobia, you have to remove the trauma that caused the phobia, because that, and when it works right, it reframes the shift of your perception of AI from existential threat, this stuff's going to kill me, to this could be a unique opportunity, that could change everything. And so again, it's a quick pitch because the class is going to be a couple hours next Wednesday on, I think it's the 9th. I'm doing the class for active NFNLP members, and it'll be recorded for people to review, because eventually we're going to have a whole library, practice building, other things for our members to kind of get the membership thing kind of refired up. So AI isn't really a threat, but it's a tool for growth. And it's about reframing your mindset, like with the Fast Phobia Cure, reframing timeline stuff, and re-anchoring, a simple one would be when you think of something you resisted, like getting a new cell phone, And then when you got to the point where you were comfortable with it, what went on in there? So your brain has a pattern. Your brain already has a pattern of adapting to technology, and in one way you could be pushing back against AI, right? Because that's the current thing that people are afraid of because the media is feeding it. And yet, you wouldn't, most people, not all, wouldn't want to live without their cell phone, without being able to Google things like this. My closing thing about that is I remember when Google really started to take off, a lot of people were complaining, and it is true. It changed education because people quit learning how to do research on, in a library, right? And people pushed back on it. Now, you can still do some, but you're not limited. So that's the little presentation today. That's what we're going to be working on, and there's ways to do it, and that's what we're going to have fun doing, because it's a big fear. I've seen it shut people down and stop them. And my fear for us in the coaching and the self-help world is if you're not on the top, if you're not on the wave as it starts, you maybe get left behind in the wake and you get buried in the riptides or something like that, right? Or you'll just get overwhelmed by it. And there are ways to do it ethically and fun. So, that's what that's a little bit about what we're going to be doing. That's next Wednesday at noon, and we're going to do the techniques, and I'll have people do it with each other. So if you have a fear of AI or some of the technologies, we can work on those. And even if you don't, but you have friends that do, this gives you a new slant on how to go into it. Because again, if you have an AI phobia, it's not your fault. It's the way your brain's working, but it is your responsibility, right? Because it's inevitable, as Thanos would say, if you're a, Avengers fan, it's like, it's inevitable. So I'd like to thank everybody for doing that. If you have any questions, reach out. And again, it'll be recorded, and I'm working on now putting together the members library. It'll probably be on Facebook. And I say that because that's another phobia some people have. I'm never going on Facebook. My only was an interesting thing, and I'll close with this. Was last year, I was talking to my group, and I was talking about Facebook and Facebook marketing, things I learned from Albert and a few other people. But we were talking about, and this person who I respect and admire, right, said he's never going on Facebook. He doesn't like Facebook, and does this. And I'm like, okay, I can respect that, but I can tell you this. You probably won't have much of a business in the next year, And he's like, well, I'm very busy now. And I go, dude, you're a double retiree from the federal government. You don't need the money to live, right? And you've got an influx. I said, once your influx of the clients you had from when you worked there go away, if you're not on Facebook or the internet or have a website, I don't know how you're going to get business. Right. And he just said, well, I never thought of it that way. And I'm like, well, which to me, it was surprising because, but, I didn't spend 27 years on active duty and 15 working at one of the 3-letter agencies. Right. So anyway, but it's inevitable. We're going to have a lot of fun with it, and it's going to be a great thing to be a part of. I hope to see you there.